Hi, my name's Dominic. I'm with the Portrayal Almanac. It looks like the march has now turned off of Washington onto Hermitage, but we are about 50 feet in front of the banners. We're here now. How do you feel in this moment?
I feel like people are starting to finally wake up to what the U.S. has been doing since the existence of the United States. And it really gives me hope, even at horrible times like these, that with enough people waking up, that there will be a liberation for Palestine and for people all over the world that are oppressed.
Sounds like you're fully committed.
Yeah, definitely.
How long have you been involved with the protests?
Probably since March. Yeah, March
And how much did you know about the issue beforehand?
I didn't really know much, to be honest. I remember seeing a few videos about Israelis detaining children, maybe in the early 2000s, and I didn't really put the dots together until recently, which, it's a long time, but I'm glad that I finally made that connection. And yeah, I'm just wanting to be here and help in any way that I can.
Welcome back. This is Andy. This is the Portrayal Almanac. This is part 2 of our fun, exciting trip to the DNC convention. Dom.
It's so funny you say that because I told a select number of people, and every time they always said, "Oh, we'll have fun," or "are you excited?" And I'm like, "Bruh, my number one goal that this whole past week has been to not get shot in the throat with a rubber bullet by a cop from Ohio. That was my number one goal. Like, I'm taking this very seriously, guys. I'm taking precautions. If I could afford a helmet, I would have taken it.
You are pretty dark-skinned. It could get dangerous.
1000%, especially at night. For me, it was definitely a very interesting, engaging, maybe even enlightening experience. So we'll talk about it. So it's currently Friday when we're recording this, August 23rd. And yeah, things started on Sunday, August 18th. I'm just going to go into it, I guess.
Yeah, give me it. Give me the good.
Yeah, so this whole past week of protesting in Chicago really brought out a lot of different organizations across the American left. And it really was a left number of marches. So each day had its own kind of march, and there were others. There was a little bit of schedule clashing, but really not all that much. And they minded their own business. They were in different parts of the city. For instance, the coalition, which we talked about, which I really focused on in the preview episode, they were in Union Park, which was east of the United Center. Meanwhile, on the west side in Humboldt Park, I believe, the Poor People's Army were there. No relation to the Poor People's Almanac or Poor Proles Almanac, which is so funny. I get our name wrong because every time I was asked, "So where are you from?" I was like, "Oh, like who are you shooting for? Who are you recording for?" It's like, "Yeah, the Poor Proles Almanac." The what? The Poor Proles Almanac. Can you spell it? Okay, yeah, poor as in not rich. Poor. Oh, I thought it was yeah.
It's come together.
It comes together slowly.
Yeah, drop the ball on this naming thing, I think.
I was like, yeah, PPA. Try and find. We talk about trees. We talk about
Mostly.
agriculture.
And then the DNC, apparently.
Yeah, occasionally. You did have I remember when I first joined, there were like an episode on like gun ownership and like self-defense. You guys talked about that. So this isn't unprecedented.
No, not at all. We kind of found our niche, but that doesn't mean we weren't interested in other things.
Yeah.
Which is why we were like, you know what? You're in Chicago. The DNC is in Chicago. Seems like it's going to be a kind of a big deal this year. And yeah, it's been interesting. So you spent a number of days. You had an expectation. Tell us what you expected first, and then we'll go into what you actually saw.
What did I expect? So yeah, like I said earlier, I took it very seriously. So a lot of people were proclaiming it was going to be like 1968, and I always, whenever there's like a fork in the road in history, I always assume the worst possible option. So it's like, yeah, this could turn into a 1968 or worse. People could die. Although to my knowledge, there are no fatalities. And that's good. Of course, certainly not rooting for that, but I definitely expected the worst. So it's like I could get injured, I could get arrested, with the police definitely on their game, potentially out of town police, just like happened at the RNC. But it seemed like the CPD definitely took some notes on that whole situation and a bunch of other notes from history as well. But in terms of my expectation, it was difficult to parse. But for me, it was either two big ones, which is that one, things would deteriorate in one of the protests, and if it was really bad at the coalition to march on the DNC protests, which was the biggest one throughout the entire week, if things got bad there, then that would have looked really bad on the city, and it could potentially push a narrative and push a certain message out there. Whether that message is good or bad, that's for you to decide. But that was my worst expectations. And I just hope that I could stay out of it, stay out of the story, don't become the story, stay safe and see what the heck happened. There was also the opposite swing of things where it's like, wow, yeah, I wonder if maybe people just got fatigued from 2020, got too scared from 2020, and a lot of talk online. So maybe like no one shows up to this thing. Maybe no one will show up after all. And it was all Twitter, Instagram likes for all the hearts, and then just kind of, I don't know, like 500 people at this march. And for just a brief second, in the hour preceding the big coalition march on Monday, August 19th, it started to look like that, but that turned out to be false, because the numbers for Monday, and I'm skipping around, but the numbers for Monday turned out to be, well, it's a little disputed. The coalition themselves, they proclaimed 20,000 on Monday. Then, of course, that's their number, so they're very likely to overinflate. But some are saying with aerial shots, maybe 7,000. I personally witnessed. I'm not great at guesstimating sizes, so average this out with a bunch of other sources. About 5,000 in terms of the height of the whole march, as in like the largest crowd. So maybe the coalition was counting people who cycled in and out, because it was at noon, the rally, and then the march, going on for like, everything went on for like 5 hours. But either way, in terms of my expectations, I was honestly running the gambit. Keep your options open, look out for whatever's kind of happening on the ground. And I think that's kind of what everyone else was expecting too, where it's like, yeah, prepare for the worst. We have street medics, we have like a prayer corner, because it's a lot of Muslim practitioners, so we're going to accommodate for them. If there's going to be provocators, and there were on the Thursday march for the coalition, there were a couple of provocators. We have the coalition has what are known as protest marshals to ensure that those provocators are dealt with, but not in a very rough and tumble way, but rather can be countered in front of the media and all that stuff. So yeah, just keeping my mind open.
Cool. So then tell me what happened. Give me the juice.
So yes, on Sunday, August 18th, as we discussed in the previous episode, the Bodies Outside of Unjust Laws, which is itself a coalition, a different coalition, they held their march in the downtown area, which is some of the most recognizable parts of Chicago, including Michigan Avenue. It was almost exclusively at Michigan Avenue, Grant Park. They passed right by the Art Institute and, of course, the Bean.
All right, to the side.
The infamous Bean.
Yeah, so the march started on Michigan and Wacker, and it grew to, I'm going to guesstimate, again, about 3,000 cycling in and out. Out of all the other marches, you could argue it was like the quote-unquote least left, and how you parse that, but it was still very progressive and actually quite left, to be frank. I was surprised by that. I was expecting more, maybe like more Bernie Bros, more this and that, but because it was more of a bodily rights group, but they actually turned out to be pretty left, and it was still very much Palestinian based, and I was very surprised by that. A lot of protesters wearing
Kefias,
the iconic scarf Palestinians wear. A lot of people wearing that piece of headwear. There were at least 2 to 3 communist groups that were part of the march, avowed communists. And I was a little surprised by that too. It's like, okay, wow, we're starting off on a stronger footing here in terms of political boldness, that this kind of coalition had formed. And even for the people who are really there for abortion rights, mostly women, of course, no surprise, they were pretty aggressive in terms of their verbal communication to everything, which was very impressive to see in terms of like, yeah, they're not pulling punches on this issue. And the reason why, a common question that was asked by people, it's like, hey, why is this pro-abortion group marching at the DNC of all places? And the answer I got from a number of people was that they're putting pressure on the DNC because they're kind of disappointed with the Democrats. And it's like, you had all this time putting all your eggs in the basket of Roe v. Wade and just assuming that it would never be, it would just stay because no justice would be crazy enough to go back on that. There's like that's settled law. Who would dare? They asked them in the in the Senate hearings, and all of the justices were like, yeah, no, we're chill with Roe v. Wade. Well, surprise, surprise.
Yes, since Roe, they've had at least 10, 12 years where they've had total control. Presidency, Congress could have easily passed legislation, and he didn't dropped it like a hot potato, didn't do anything.
Well,
so,
like the Employee Free Choice Act was another thing when he had these, I'm going to do it, never did it. So
right. So I think the bigger the movement can, and the bigger these demonstrations around the DNC can be, show to them and to the Republicans, if they get whoever's in government, show that there's a movement out there that isn't going to shut up.
A lot of people wearing QR code shirts that would link to distributors for abortion pills. And that was very impressive to see. And in fact, at some point down Michigan Avenue, right at about the Art Institute, about 3 counter protesters showed up. And again, versus the 3,000, give or take. But it was 3 anti-abortion protesters. They showed up with a megaphone, so they were able to audibly kind of pair with at least the front of the line. And the press immediately swarmed them as soon as they showed up, which was a recurring theme for this entire week. It was like vultures. As soon as those 3 protesters again, really just 1, 2, 3 protesters showed up against this several thousand group, all the press just swung over to the anti-abortion protesters and just took pictures for about 10 to 15 minutes. And it was really disappointing and also really funny to see them crowd around like that. But several of the QR shirt wearing folks, they just got right behind them, right next to them safely so that the CPD didn't get involved. And then they, so they were part of those pictures. But as I will repeatedly point out, the press were just really swarming every little thing, every single cough that a protester might have taken. There was someone there sticking a mic or a camera in their face. I personally tried not to be. I didn't try to be Jake Gyllenhaal Nightcrawler. Have you seen the movie?
I have not. No, I'll trust you on it though.
I took a swing and a miss on that one, but yes, that's a movie about the really shitty press practices. But yeah, so I'll definitely be revisiting that topic. But after those 3 protesters went away after a while, it was a pretty controlled, not low stakes, but rather low, and I don't want to even say low intensity, but there really was no danger of a quote unquote 1968 moment, right?
So what you're saying is we hyped everything up for no reason.
No, we didn't hype anything up for no reason because we're gonna get to the Tuesday, but here at Sunday, the group had said that they wanted to march to the General John Logan statue, kind of mirroring like the 1968 protesters. But when we got there, and they probably knew this ahead of time, and I just didn't get this press release. When I got there at the statue, because I went a little bit ahead, it was completely walled off with those waist-high serrated security barriers. So there was just no chance that was happening. So they just found a grassy area on the southwest corner, I think. Yeah, southwest corner of Grant Park. And they ended the night there. And by the end of that night, I was like, oh my God, I am not good at stamina. This is a thing that I should have been practicing more and not getting off my ass to edit. But in terms of the protest itself, definitely loud. It was definitely proud. It was still very, very pro-Palestinian. It was like, in terms of the general vibe and messaging of the whole thing, it was like 50-50, maybe even 60-40 more pro-Palestinian, which was a little interesting. Also interesting how CPD, Chicago Police Department were, and this caused some concern, I noticed right away, that on the march was exclusively on the street itself, right? On Michigan Avenue, which is a pretty wide street, one lane, southbound lane, so not the northbound lane. And CPD bicycle police, like we had talked about earlier in the previous episode, they were on both sides. So wherever the march ended, wherever the street ended, CPD was also on the edges of those streets on the left and right, following the protest the entire way through. And I thought, oh crap, if I have to get in and out, I can't. I have to either get to the front or go all the way to the back and then go back out into the sidewalk. Now, at least on that night, I noticed that people were able to go in and out of the bike line, but it was very selective because it was like, well, is this cop in particular going to let me through? Are they feeling like it? And I didn't know what their directives were, but people were able to leave in and out. So it, like I said, low chance of anything ugly happening. And I think the night ended with mostly the socialist, communist, red shirt wearing groups. There were some speeches by DSA leadership, Democratic Socialist leadership, and I think one of the presidential candidates for one of the socialist organizations. I'm not quite sure. But that was Sunday. Oh, and I should also mention people who also another group that would show up throughout the week was the National Lawyers Guild, and they'll play an important part later on. I started calling them green hats because they were all wearing neon green hats, which was a very smart choice because you could quickly spot them. And they were acting as legal observers, and they worked in pairs, and they were sprinkled throughout the protest, up and down the protest line. And they pretty much just took notes. It's like, hey, I think I noticed something. None of them really wanted to take interviews, which makes sense because they're working in a legal capacity. But it seemed like they would take notes whenever seemingly some kind of police transgression or some legal mishap might have taken place from the police specifically.
Interesting. Now you've teased me with more. Hey, we're taking a quick break in the episode to remind you that you can get a whole lot more information from portrayal.com. On our website, we have access to our supplemental reader for the podcast, which provides more depth and context as well as thorough citations for all of the stuff we talk about in the show. You can also sign up for our newsletter, which updates you about limited releases, such as various nursery stock that we sometimes sell through the Poor Proles website, as well as updates about new merch that we have. You can also support the show through that website, portrayal.com, where you have access to our Patreon and our Substack to get early releases for articles and episodes. Now, if you enjoy the show and are just looking for even more audio content, go check out Tomorrow Today, which just wrapped up season 1, or tune into the Gastropocene, which is a project of myself and Dr. Aisha Khan to discuss the way our diets have driven the Anthropocene and what it looks like to use our diets for good. Now, back to the show.
Name is Mo.
Mo?
Yes.
And how long have you been involved with the movement here? Healthcare Workers for Palestine. Are you a healthcare worker?
So I work in the healthcare, and I think we've been on the streets for the past 10 months, consistent, and it seems like the Democratic Party is not listening.
Yeah, so you're dressed here, this audio, you're dressed here, mask with the Palestinian flag markings, and you've got Palestinian colors on you got breastplate and shoulder pads. Did you construct this yourself?
So I constructed this myself. First of all, I want to amplify their voice. That's one thing. And second, I think it's because of the police brutality. I have been protesting for over 10 months, and I have seen getting pepper sprayed, tear gases. We have been where they push or shove us to this, arrested as well. So we have been seeing violence and brutality from the police. This is just to minimize the effects and protect ourselves. Because it's bound to happen. They arrest marshals, they arrest legal observers, they arrest organizers. So we have to be just a little careful.
Hypothetically speaking, if violence does occur, Do you plan on hitting back in any way, shape, or form?
See, we're peaceful protesters. We are here for justice, for arms embargo right now. We are literally a good citizen that are asking their politicians to stop the war. This is a matter of protection because we've seen their violence. So if they come at us, I'm just trying to minimize my damage. I have my goggles, I have my pads and everything just to be ready safety-wise. I'm not ready to hit back. This is just another violence, and violence over violence doesn't make an answer. So, and you know who's stronger. So they're arresting us, records, that. We're not scared. When it comes to justice, we will fight back. We will resist back. We will do all that if it's going to save children's lives. But we are giving them the benefit of the doubt of listening, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Have you ever personally been arrested?
I have been a lot of protests. Every single friend of mine has got arrested.
All your friends have been arrested?
All of them. Not even one single person has not been arrested.
Wow. How many? Can you put an estimated number on that?
I protest 2 to 3 times a week, a month.
A month.
In the past 10 months, I have been in all the protests that we have. I have not had one protest where, maybe 1 or 2, where we don't get no arrest. But majority, 90% of the time, somebody will get arrested. Trespassing, they give you the stupidest thing. You're on the street, you're doing whatever the stupid excuses they find to get you arrested.
Monday, August 19th was the big coalition mark. And I spoke with Fayani and I talked with them, and in terms of their nervousness, they really weren't all that nervous because there was a big thing like we had been, as we detailed throughout the whole night. Hey, is it gonna go down Lake Street like the permit says you can, or are you gonna go down Washington Street, which you were not permitted to do?
Any last minute jitters about the marching, about any police presence here? You got the choppers overhead, you got the bike cops, you got the yellow vested cops.
I don't have any jitters because we're a collective, and we're a very capable collective, and this was a very comprehensive, long and arduous process to get here. And so I trust that the people that I organized this with are ready.
You know, between the medics, between the marshals, and between the people tabling specifically for the event itself, how many people do you think you're leaning on in terms of the staff?
I think we have a couple hundred staff. Like, I think 150-ish, maybe to 200.
All volunteer?
Yeah, we're literally all volunteers.
You're a volunteer.
I'm a volunteer, and we're basically powered by seeing our self-interest in change, seeing our self-interest in the fact that the tens of billions of dollars going to Palestine can actually go to supporting a decent life here.
Well, it turns out that they did march their march down Washington Street, and the police, for their part, they let them do it. The moment of highest tension for Monday was right at the very beginning. Everyone's loud, everyone's excited, electric kind of atmosphere. You could palpably feel it as like, hey, we're going to march. We're going to go down this street, even though we're not permitted to do so. I think I saw Superintendent Larry Snelling there. It was hard to see because, again, the press kind of swarmed him, but they were able to march down Washington Street, at least partially, because the coalition said that they wanted to go the whole way through, going right past the DNC. Well, instead, it turned out to be kind of a non-verbal halfway agreement where it's like, okay, you'll march partially down Washington Street and then take a turn, and then you can go finish on Lake Street. And that's basically what they did. I'm going to say for that march, from my point of view, it was about 5,000, like I said. So definitely the most of the night. 5,000 in terms of like at the very most at any given time. In terms of the composition of the marchers, I would definitely say solidly left-wing, even more left-wing than Sunday. So you've got even more communist groups handing out newspapers, handing out flyers, low-key kind of competing with each other. No confrontations between any of them that I witnessed, but they were definitely like, I kept asking them, and I think only a couple of them wanted to go on the record, but I kept asking them like, yeah, so what do you think people can do to get involved? And they all kept saying, well, join our group, join and do this and that. And we all have different opinions on the squad. Some are anti-squad altogether. And by squad, I mean AOC, Rashida Tlaib.
Our lovely gang of bandits.
Exactly. Some are partial squats. It's like, oh, I only support Ilhan Omar because she's been the most vocal pro-Palestinian out of them. Some are like pro-Bernie. Some are fuck Bernie because, you know, I was a Bernie do or die person. It was all over the place, as most communist socialist groups tend to be. Hey, Dominic in post-production here. Since we're at this point in the conversation, I'm going to play 5 interviews from 5 different members of leftist organizations at the protests, each who have unique views of the left in 2024 from one another. And we'll start with a member of the RMC, or Revolutionary Maoist Coalition.
So you just got a lot of theory, a lot of history here that you've managed to impressively recount. In terms of what people can do right now, and let's say there's someone who maybe they leans a little progressive, but they're not really into this, they're not really aware of this communism stuff necessarily. What would you say to get them involved?
Join an organization. Join the Revolutionary Maoist Coalition. Join For the People, the Barikan Liberation Front. You know, there's the revolutionary study groups that exist across the country. Join an organization, study Marxism, boycott the election, and, you know, really integrate yourself into the masses, propagate the ideas of revolution, and struggle for unity.
Next is a member from the PSL, or Party of Socialism and Liberation. My apologies, I had to use my backup audio on this one.
In 2024, the opinions described as being on the left, being against war, being spending for people's needs like housing, healthcare, are actually in general very popular amongst the majority of people. What we're out here today is to raise up those demands. Specifically right here is the demands for abortion rights, for LGBTQ rights, which are under attack across the country, despite a Democrat administration. And we have the DNC here in Chicago to try to paint that everything is going well, that there's not a genocide happening, that people's needs are being met, and we're here to assert that there is a genocide in Palestine. There are these bans on abortion being implemented across the country, these bans on affirming care for trans people, attacks on LGBTQ people in general, and, you know, raise up those demands that the majority of people in this country care about on our behalf.
Yeah.
Up next is a member from the DSA, or Democratic Socialists of America, and a self-proclaimed member of the Weather Underground.
I'm a member of the Weathermen Underground and also a member of the Democratic Socialists of America from West Suburban Illinois.
Weathermen Underground, I noticed you got, is that some kind of bat or sporting equipment in your backpack?
Yeah, that is a bat.
Yeah, and I think I saw you yesterday at the Sunday March. Sunday March with a baseball helmet as well.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate any kind of violence? Is that why are you carrying that?
We do not endorse violence. We only endorse self-defense. So if the pigs start attacking, we have no choice but to defend ourselves.
Have you partaken in any kind of self-defense in terms of the police before?
Never.
Never?
Me personally never, but some of my comrades maybe did.
Were you around for the 2020 protests?
No, because I was 15.
So, okay, so that makes you about 19 or so now?
I'm 19, yeah.
Yeah, if I can do my math correctly, but either way, Weathermen Underground, you are familiar with the history of that group and that name?
Yes, the Weathermen Underground was created in the late 1960s as a result from the separation, as it was one of the groups. It was from the Revolutionary Youth Movement of the Students for a Democratic Society. It was against the Progressive Labor Party controlling this SDS. The Weathermen are anti-imperialist. They're pro-left. We supported the Black Panther Party. We supported Fred Hampton, the Rainbow Coalition, and we were out there in the streets supporting the Viet Cong, protesting against U.S. imperialism and the U.S. fascism.
Would it be fair to say you're a militant group?
Yes, we are a militant group.
What are your thoughts on the DSA right now?
Currently, the DSA is it's a multi-tendency party, so they're obviously pro-Zionist and anti-Zionist. Right now, the anti-Zionists are own like the entire DSA, and we're basically against AOC against Cory Bush. We're only for Rashid Tlaib. He's the only democratic socialist in the Democratic Party who is truly for revolution. Who's truly against imperialism.
Partial squad supporter.
Yeah, partial squad supporter. I am that.
Okay. And do you have anything left to say here? Walk away as the march as the rally is about to begin in a few minutes.
Yes. Free Palestine, end U.S. imperialism.
Then we have a concerted spokesperson from the RCA, or Revolutionary Communists of America.
We don't have to make some, weird militia group or whatever. Like our aim is to appeal to the masses of people that already exist, in these organizations and say, all right, this is how we should do things.
How do you feel the left is here in 2024? The left being a very, very wide spectrum.
Yeah, I once heard that, the left starts at abolishing capitalism, and I always like that. Because, people are like, yeah, I'm on the left, I support a two-state solution, and you're like, oh, that's very far from left. So, how the left is in Chicago specifically, you're just in 2024.
I guess, let's say in Chicago, yeah.
Well, generally, we say this, that the crisis of the last 70 years of the working class specifically, not the left, but those two are tied, is a crisis of leadership. So we feel that the left, and then again, we're not talking about the rank and file members of these organizations.
Sure.
Like most of us were members of other organizations. It's mainly the leadership, like the AOCs of the world, the Bernies of the world, that are lacking the principle and the dedication and to see things through to the end. So the left is very, I would say, scattered, but only so much in leadership, really. I think they're really just looking for the correct political line, and that's what we're here to put out.
Not a big squad member these days.
Oh, no, how could you be? Especially after, I would say, the decisive this is over moment was the 2022 railroad strike, where the railroad unions authorized a strike over Christmas, and the squad, they all got together and said, nope, that's illegal, and that's, that would never happen. Like, for example, I doubt they'd let one of us get that far, but let's say they let one of us get that far. If one of our members made that decision, they would not be a member anymore. That would be the last day of their tenure in our party.
So then, I'll just leave with this. What is something that the average person, let's say they're not very involved in politics to begin with, what is something they can do to get involved, to help their community?
Well, really, it's a great question. Helping out at strikes, like wherever the workers are, wherever the people are. Like, it doesn't mean you just fetishize the moment and spontaneity and, oh, there's a strike or there's a protest, I'm going to do this. But, it's going to where the workers are and listening to the people of the strikes. But if you want to talk about real revolutionary activity, and it sounds boring and it's kind of trite, but it is reading the history and the philosophy so that you can steel yourself in it, because you can't predict the future. We don't know what strikes or protests or what is going to come up next, but I can't prepare myself for that. And I can prepare myself, the best example, leaders are going to pop up all over, wherever a crisis is. If your apartment building is on fire, 1 or 2, 5 people, they're knocking on doors, getting people out. You got to stay ready, so you have to get ready. When that fire starts in your community or whatever, being well-read politically, knowing the organizations and being able to intervene.
Finally, we have a sitting alderman from the 50-person Chicago City Council, Alderman Carlos Ramirez Rosa of the 35th Ward, based out of Logan Square. Ramirez Rosa is a member of the DSA and the chair of the City Council's 6-person Democratic Socialist Caucus. He was Mayor Brandy Johnson's original choice for a legislative whip, and he has been described as a power player in Chicago's left wing.
You're part of the Democratic Socialist Caucus here as part of the City Council, and so generally, how do you feel like the left is doing nationally here in 2024?
I think internationally, the left is doing well. The right was defeated in France. In Mexico, we saw Morena sweep the elections. I think that the U.S. left should look to other successful models in the South, in our hemisphere, in Europe. I think that, we have to unite in this moment to defeat fascism and to defeat Donald Trump. But the most important work is the work that happens in the streets. In many ways, the DNC is a big production. It's a big show. They hire the same companies that produce the Grammys, that produce the Emmys. There's going to be speeches. There's going to be a lot of rhetoric. There's going to be, musical performances. But politics occurs on the streets. This is politics. This is democracy. People coming together to envision a different world. And so I think we as the U.S. left have to continue to have that perspective of what are we building in our streets? What are we building in our communities? Whether that be through networks of mutual aid coming together, whether that be through unions, whether that be through independent political organizations of neighbors coming together to demand that their needs be met in their neighborhoods. That, to me, I think is the important work of the left in the coming years. And so I think it's incredibly important that people came together today to demand an end to the killing in Gaza and to demand an end to U.S. arms supplies to Israel. I think it's going to be incredibly important that in the coming weeks and months and years that the U.S. left continue to do that and that we continue to unite at the grassroots level.
So you're out here with thousands of people. What would you have to say to the hundreds of the thousands that are in the DNC right now, to the delegates? What would you have to say from this point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the killing in Gaza must stop. And Chicago, as the host city, our council voted to support a ceasefire. There are thousands of people out here right now. I would say there's more people here than will be at the convention. There's about 5,000 delegates at the convention. I think there's over 5,000 people here right now. And these thousands of people are here on a Monday afternoon demanding a ceasefire because the killing must stop. And so I think that it's important that, Kamala Harris is the nominee and that the Democratic Party nationally understand just how much support there is for a ceasefire and to an end to the killing in Gaza.
But definitely, without a doubt, and it was a very multi-issue group as well. At the press conference a couple hours before the rally began, you had speakers, immigration from centered around Latin American immigration, but also Asian American immigration, and really just a whole slate of different things. And as for the rally, it was on a big stage, and people are definitely getting amped up and riled up. There were a couple of counter protesters. There was a woman holding up a sign that looks like she was trying to get punched, and I won't say her name to give her any credit, but she was trying to get punched with like racial epitaphs on a sign, just so she could get the clips of it. There was one gentleman who was wearing an army hat and holding an American flag, and he was mostly quiet, except he would occasionally like shout something. And they were mostly blocked. He was mostly blocked off by protest marshals and even other protesters in a non-physical manner, just kind of get in front of him so that the cameras could ignore him. But as for the march itself, marched down Washington, took a couple turns once police kind of said like, yeah, we're planting our ground here. We're not going to let you through this one. At some point, and I wasn't there to witness this, but at some point, there had been some disagreements between coalition protest marshals and then another protest group that would protest the next day, and they were known as Behind Enemy Lines. And there was some footage caught on by the independent press group Unicorn Riot, where it's a lot of verbal altercation between, hey, the BEL group, who I'll be calling them, BEL group kind of arguing, hey, we should all be marching straight towards the DNC. We should be pushing past the police lines. We should be going this way and ignoring what CPD says. And we should be being a little bit more aggressive and forceful. And the protest marshals being like, well, we didn't quite agree to this. So we're gonna keep doing our thing, and you can do your own, but we're not gonna let any of that happen. And that became a point of contention in the extremely niche Twitter leftist sphere, where it's like, oh, our protest marshals.
No way.
Yeah. Who could have thought? What? It was like, oh, our protest marshals just want to be cops, etc. But I think it came down to the fact that the coalition, they advertised their thing, they advertised their event as being something that a more casual person could come to. That way it could build a mass movement, literally on the streets themselves.
On Monday, there were verbal altercations between coalition protest marshals and members of the Behind Enemy Lines protest group. How do you think the protest marshals handled that situation? What do you have to say about those members of the BEL group?
So we believe in something called the St. Paul Principles. And in the St. Paul Principles, we understand and respect the diversity of tactics in our movement. There are a number of coalitions, there are a number of organizations that are doing this work. We believe we are as militant an organization and a coalition as anyone else. But we said specifically our mass mobilization on Monday and our mass mobilization today is for children and for seniors and for people of all different physical abilities and all different immigration statuses. A mass mobilization for the masses. We won't criticize other disruptions, escalations. We won't criticize other tactics. That's what the St. Paul Principles says.
And I saw a dozen children at this thing, which kind of shows you, again, the intensity in terms of potential for violence really wasn't all that much. A lot of talk about like, fuck you, Biden, killer Kamala, genocide, or it was like baby killer Blinken. Those were terms that were tossed around extremely casually by the chanters, by regular people I was talking to. It was very much forceful language. But in terms of the potential for police violence, it really wasn't all that much, so long as it pertained to the march itself. And yeah, because I saw maybe not infants, but like in strollers, like 3 years old and their parents. And none of them wanted to go on microphone, but I'm like, wow, this is bold. That's a real risk take there, almost irresponsible, personally speaking, for a kid in a stroller. But I guess that's my opinion. In terms of breakoff groups, so the the front of the march did go into Park 578, which is a block away from United Center. And at this park, there was a city-provided CDOT, Chicago Department of Transportation, provided a sound system for anyone to use. And one of these slots that you could sign up for was the coalition. So they used it for 45 minutes, pretty much exclusively for a chanting session. So they got on the hill, they got on the jungle gyms with their Palestinian flags, which was, I took a picture of that, and I think this is the closest we're going to get to people climbing the General John Logan statue from 1968, is people climbing this jungle gym at the park.
It's the little things.
It's the little things, really. And it was a pretty, in terms of optics and vantage point, from the protesters' point of view, I'd say it looked pretty good, simply because it was the United Center was right there. Now, granted, there were like 2 layers of security fencing, like 10 feet high or something, 7-8 feet high, with like concrete barriers on them. But it was a very clear view for the cameras. Once the 45 minutes were up, the march continued back onto the street, and the front of the march, which I followed, the front of the march left and continued on the route back, circled back around to Lake Street so that they could go back to Union Park. Now, I didn't witness this, but a breakoff group, from photos that I've seen, maybe a couple hundred, stayed behind at the park, and they did enough kind of banging on the fence that they were able to effectively breach one panel, because the fence was made up of several panels kind of closely put together to form a fence. They took off one of the panels, and they were able to technically breach that first fencing, and spill onto the street. I forget the name of that street, but they were spill onto that street. Now, they weren't anywhere close to bum rushing the DNC parking lot, because there was that second layer. There was a shit ton of police on that side of the fencing. And as soon as the fence even looked like it was come undone, from what I saw, I think in video, police were already there in riot gear and already scooping up protesters. And I think about 4 or so arrests were made. There probably would have been more. But again, from what I saw in pictures and video, the press were just climbing that breach just as much as the protesters were, kind of hindering both protester and police. And from what I saw in the video, it's like, yeah, police can't arrest people because they can't determine who's press and who's protester. Meanwhile, the protesters was like, we have no freedom of movement to like maneuver around the police because there's a dude with a camera right there shoving this thing in my face. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, is this going to be the whole week?
Way to be in the way, Dom. You and your podcast.
I was not there. That was not me. I was independent.
The YouTubers, the bread tubers with their live streaming content.
Obviously I couldn't determine who was who, but honestly, I genuinely think the independent people were a lot better about this than like either the mainstream folks. Oh my God, the real mainstream folks who were like, they were wearing like I'm not gonna lambast them for wearing maybe more like padded armor and helmets, because that's actually a good idea. But they had like they had like bodyguards. Whenever press brings bodyguards, especially like three, I think I saw like three bodyguards on a different day on a single person with a camera, so like a camera guy, the guy on the microphone, and then like three security guards. I'm like, Jesus Christ, dude, how can you even report on anything with this many people surrounding you at all times? Kind of keeping you away from the story. But that's, again,
right. You are the story. We're talking about you. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. I want to be very clear. I am not a journalist. I don't have a degree in any of this stuff, but I've watched enough clips online where it's like, this is ridiculous. And I saw it firsthand right there, how that happens. Yeah. So that happened. And I didn't even hear about it personally until I got home that night. In terms of Monday, CPD did the same tactic with their bikes, which was covering both sides of the march on the street, like a river of people. And then on both sides was like let's say you're trying to transport water from one place to another. It was like
the dikes.
Dikes, yeah. So it's like dikes on either side of a flow of a river, which is what the bicycle police were. In terms of that, it was, according to the coalition, a successful march because they got what they wanted. They got within sight and sound of the DNC, very much so, especially with that fence breach, which they didn't sanction. They got there with thousands of people. Regardless of the number, it was, from my point of view, at least 5,000 in terms of the critical mass of people. And they were able to say their thing for several hours, and really without any incident from police. They were able to protect and police themselves.
Howdy.
Hello.
Hang on, let me try that again. Hello, skeleton army.
That's aggressive.
Yeah. I'm Angel Luna.
I'm Nash Flynn. Welcome to Death and Friends.
We're two comedians with a podcast.
It's very original of us.
Quiet, you. It is a history tour about everyone's final destination.
As an academic
nerd,
I have a PhD. Kind of have a PhD. Anyway, I've researched a lot of death history.
And also, I'm here.
We'll talk about ways we die, ways we get buried, and ways we get remembered.
And we even make some friends along the way.
Is it a comedy podcast about death? Or a death history podcast that's funny? We have no idea.
Look, death can be tricky to talk about.
And even though we're talking about it a lot,
just please know, in fact, remember that you are loved, you matter, and if you don't want to be your own friend, we will happily be your friend.
Put me in your top 8, baby.
Join us and listen to Death and Friends.
Become a member of the Skeleton Army.
Like right now. Do it.
It's mandatory. Go on. Subscribe. Hit the button.
Yep. You say it. Did you do it? Yes? Okay, good. Okay. Love you.
Love you.
Death and Friends podcast.
Available everywhere you listen to podcasts.
Death? And the state that we are in as a society in the U.S., this is actually insane. I don't even know where to go from here.
Would you consider yourself being on the left?
You know what? I consider myself being a Palestinian. I don't give a fuck about the left. I don't give a fuck about the right. They're both part of the same fucking system. They're both just playing all of us. This is just all manipulation, bro. There's not really a real left or a right, bro. This is just a bunch of capitalism and capitalist motherfuckers who are billionaires profiting off of our shit, and they just keep dividing us by telling us about the right and the left and all of that shit.
So did you feel like there was anything leading up to the following nights? Obviously, the DNC, builds up to the final night. So did you feel like you were seeing that ratchet up continue with the protests themselves, or did it seem to go the other way?
Yeah, so it did kind of escalate from a tiny bit from Sunday to Monday. Well, actually not a tiny bit, a decent amount just because of that fence breach, but that wasn't the coalition's doing. Tuesday night was the most rough and tumble night of them all. And I'm really going to go hard on the freaking press here. But yes, it was the Behind Enemy Lines group. And they have been definitely the most forceful group, most verbally aggressive group of them all. On their YouTube, which only has like couple hundred views on maybe a couple videos. But they've been holding protests at the Art Institute where, maybe a handful of people, they go into the middle of the Art Institute. There's just a museum, the museum, and they, throw some flyers in the air and shout for a little while before getting escorted out.
One of those.
Yeah. This group, they were at the Monday coalition march argue with the protest marshals to try and say, you could even say co-opt the march itself from its intended function. But Tuesday was their night because their stated goal was to shut down the DNC and to make it great like 1968. It almost sounded like they were angling for a fight. Well, that definitely brought a lot of people out there, especially the indie press as well. And I got there about an hour before at 6, and their stated start time was 7, and their starting point was the building housing the Israeli consulate, which is on 500 West Madison Street between Clinton and Canal. If you're listening to this on desktop, maybe pull up a map and look up 500 West Madison Street, Chicago, because I'm going to do a little geography, but really not that much because this group didn't get very far. So when the time came for them to show up and do their thing, about 200 people at most showed up in a group marching west down Madison Street from the east, from the loop itself. And they were marching, they had their flags, they had this big banner with like a wood frame on it. I think it was even like pointed a little, like the framing of it was coming at a corner, so it was a little more like it thrusted out. And the press rushed towards them, and there were police on both sides of the sidewalk, and they were waiting to form rank on the two sides of the block on West Madison Street between Clinton and Canal. Madison Street runs east-west, and then Clinton and Canal go north-south. And when that happened, I saw the police really form up, and it eventually escalated to them forming several layers, at least 4 layers deep. So you've got bike cops up front, let the material take the hits first, the metal. After that, you've got yellow vests, and then you've got the riot police, the concerted riot police. And yeah, when the group showed up, when the BEL group showed up behind enemy lines, they kind of had a mini rally for about 30 minutes. And it was this, I don't want to say calm before the storm, just because they were very loud and noisy. They brought their own megaphone system as well. And they did a couple of speeches and then a lot of chanting. And for a while, a lot of the press and some independent protesters, they showed up and they were kind of like on the outer rung of it. I talked to one gentleman. He was a little older. His name was Bennett Weiss. And he was there on the other nights of protest. He has this like big umbrella with, he's told me, like 450 buttons, like buttons that you clip on your shirt or backpack on this umbrella. And he was selling them, but also was like, yeah, if you can't afford it, that's fine, just take it. If you want to donate, you can give me like a couple bucks here if you want to, whatever you're feeling like. And he had like 1,000 buttons in this luggage behind him. It's like, yeah, I got thousands of buttons in this luggage here. So like, and I asked him, I was like, hey, are you concerned about if there's potential violence here? Are you concerned about any damage to this umbrella, to these buttons, to your bag?
Not really. I mean, que sera, sera. My umbrella gets destroyed, I'll get another umbrella.
You worried about you being this close to any potential violence or protesting?
No, I'm not worried about it. I mean, what's the point? If it happens, it happens. I don't feel like I myself am in any particular danger, but if I'm part of the collateral damage because of something someone else does, well, that's life.
Yeah, hopefully a long one, a good one for you.
It's already been long.
Oh, okay.
Just like extremely lackadaisical. He's been to a few of these before, it looks like.
Nice. Gotta love an apathetic old man.
You know, and it's so funny, slight tangent, but like, it was so funny that the most lackadaisical and the guys who were most willing to talk to me were the older progressive dudes. So a couple of them around since 1968 when they were kids. And it was like, yeah, you know, it's so cool. It's so nice to see the newer generation of folks, step up. And it was really funny. But regardless, yes, at around 7:30 p.m., the group of more or less 200, their stated goal was to march from the Israeli consulate down the street straight to the United Center, because Madison Street, it's a straight shot to the United Center. Well, the police immediately on Clinton, so not even leaving the block, stayed in their formation, in their lines, their 4, 5, 6 person deep line, and they just kind of stood there. Now, it should be noted that the BEL group did not have any permits with them, unlike the previous 2 days of protest and even the next night of protest. So this was the one group that was most likely to see some potential scuffles, and scuffle they did at 7:30.
Hold on, we got movement. They're probably going to meet the police line. Stand by. Now comes a small test for the press to see if they'll get the heck out of the way. Protesters are about as close as they've been. Press is still there between them. Press is still getting in there. There we go. We've got some pushing and pulling. 1931. You got some pushing. Police thrusting forward. Green hats are in the middle of the scuffle.
So 7:30 happened. I stayed out of it, but the press, once again, as they were marching towards the police line, the press got right, like a good 20 of them stayed in the middle because they wanted their Pulitzer Prize winning shot. And a couple of them did get caught up in the scuffle. But anyway, as soon as the protesters did meet the police, finally, police immediately, like that wood frame banner I was talking about, immediately collapsed. It just like disintegrated. It just fell apart. It got ripped apart by the police. And then, some shouting, some chants, the classic police chant of move back, move back. A lot of nightsticks, not so much like bashing, like concerted offensive, hitting over the head with it, but more so like pushing back with the stick. And we were worried. A lot of people starting to don helmets, starting to don gas masks, none of which I had because I can't afford that shit. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to stay even further back. I stayed within the block, but I'm not going to do this thing where I stay in the middle of it and get in between the two warring parties. But effectively what happened is the police were able to stand right where they were because with only 200 people, that's really not a lot against another 150 people, especially when they've got body armor and bicycles and a whole security apparatus backing them up. And what I saw, and even building up to that, what I could already tell, is like, this is kettling on full display, or what CPD calls, quote unquote, encirclement. It's kettling. It's exactly what it is. And yeah, the group got pushed south. So now, and again, I'm talking within very small dozens of feet of movement here. The group eventually got pushed to the south side of the intersection at Clinton and Madison, but the police again boxed them in from being able to go south down Clinton, despite the protesters wanting to move south down Clinton. And yeah, they effectively kettled them in. And then they kind of pushed them back towards their original spot in front of the building at 500 West Madison. And that was probably the most physically aggressive mass action between the two groups. From there on, it was pickings. But in terms of that, there was that kind of like a round one, and we were like, oh, is there going to be a round two to this? Not quite exactly what happened. So the BEL group got pushed back, and then they kind of had another mini rally for about 45 minutes. They did burn one of those fusion flags where it's half one flag, half the other. In this case, an American flag and an Israeli flag. And they lit it on, they formed a circle. The protesters formed a circle. They lit it on fire. A few seconds of cheering and chanting, and then the press rushed past the protesters to form an inner circle within the protesters' own circle to get their, again, Pulitzer Prize winning shot.
Bonfire has been set in the middle. I believe that might be an Israeli flag. I cannot confirm.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
press got in the middle of that one real quick. There's now an inner ring of press with an outer ring of the original protesters. Legal observers, green hats can barely get in.
Shout out to the press folks that were helping each other up and like picking up each other's equipment and making sure they were okay. At that point, we were all like, wow, these are just literal vultures. Like, yes, that is precisely what they are.
That's about right. And social media made everyone think they can do it. So now there's way more, and the standard is low. Sorry, Dom. I'm not talking about you.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Truth be told, that was me. The general ease of access compared to decades and centuries before. It's like, yeah, no, this is something that I thought I could do, and I was able to do. But I also had the good sense of maybe don't get in the middle of things.
Yeah.
There's a saying, do not become the story. And it kind of has a double meaning, I think, in journalism, where it's like, hey, don't get killed so that we don't have to write an obituary about you. But also, yeah, principally, do not put your thumb on the scale of things, which definitely happened. But yeah, as I was watching this kind of unfold, I could tell right away, this is for what they wanted to do, for what the protesters wanted to do. It was kind of doomed from the start, because it was like, if I can see they're outnumbered within the block, you know, there's hundreds and hundreds of police waiting in the block surrounding us, ready and willing to just swoop in and triple, quadruple reinforce this line and just completely overwhelm them.
Well, they've had one go at it. 1943, they came back, rallied. We'll see if they have a second in them. But they are far outnumbered by the police and encapsulated on all sides. They're kettled very effectively here by police who have been training and making sure that their tactics are in place for this very moment. The police have time on their side. They outnumber the protesters, who have no way of getting reinforcements from any outside groups. They've got it locked down tight. It would take some kind of 40 chess outside reinforcement, and certainly not spontaneously for them to be able to do so. 2013, any second round has not materialized.
And one of the key things that happened in, well, any protest really, in 2020, in 1968, and whatever protest you go to, is that when things look like they're really taking off, gaining momentum, it's when they have the numbers. They have that ability to kind of completely overwhelm what's happening in terms of just literal people power, like in the most physical sense imaginable. But this was not the case. And there were, after that first contact, I could see a couple of protesters get a little rattled, which, hey, that's definitely what happens. It was a very young group. I talked to one street medic, so she didn't get in scuffles, but she was one street medic. She could not have been taller than 5'5", the shortest, most demure, quietest person I talked to that whole week.
I see you got a red cross, red tape on your person, on your body.
Yeah.
Would you safe to presume you're a medic?
Yes.
Were you at the previous protest?
Yes.
Yeah. How do you think tonight's going to go?
I'm just hoping we'll minimize injury, obviously, as a medic.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if anything goes down, I'll go down with it, see how many people I can help.
Shout out to her to have the balls to be a street medic at this particular protest. So you can say that she really earned her stripes. And when I say street medic, it's like people who they use red tape to make a red cross, and they just have, store-bought medical supplies and are able to do immediate triage, combat life-saving if need be.
Yeah, usually just routine maintenance kind of stuff. People's cuts, scrapes, and dehydration tend to be what a majority of it actually is, but it's always good to have those skill sets.
At the very worst, check tourniquets if need be, again, to get the more trained medical personnel in there. But in terms of the first scuffle, the green hats, the legal observers, they were definitely there, and they were really earning their stripes there compared to the other marches, because they were taking a crap ton of notes. When people were getting arrested, the green hats were calling out, "What's your name? What's your name?" That way they can record it, and then they can check on them later to make sure that they've been processed properly and don't get, caught up in the system and something mysterious happens, as has been known to happen in the history of policing. But 45 minutes passed in this second kind of mini rally, and I can hear on the other side, on Canal Street, on Madison Canal, on the other side of a police line, there are some pro-Israel protesters. I couldn't see them. I could see their flags and their chanting, but the BEL protesters, they started facing east. And that's when I thought, oh, this is going to be round two. Helmets going back on, gas masks going back on. It's like, oh, they're going to charge the police line to try and get to the protesters. That's not what happened. After about maybe another 20 minutes of them going back and forth chanting again through the police line. The police were looking both ways now on that east side of the block. The BEL protesters were like, all right, we had enough. We want to go to the United Center. So we're going to go around the police line and we're going to go the United Center on a different route. And the police back on the west side of the block at Madison and Clinton, classic kettling tactic. They formed a very clear obstacle of human bodies, of police bodies, but they did allow for very clear, wide places for them to be able to get out and to go a route that the police could predict.
Police are securing the perimeter. It should be noted that they are allowing an escape route for the protesters. They've turned the corner. They are not blocking off Clinton and Madison. They are allowing them to escape from the north side. Protesters slowly moving south down the line. I'm seeing an unhelmeted police commander on the front line there, white shirt. He's nodding. I'm not sure where he's leading them to. I haven't checked my 9 o'clock. Shifting south. The police are going to let them out on the south end. They're letting them out. They're letting them out and they're leaving. So there was absolutely no way the protesters were going to be able to march west on Madison. So instead, the police opened up on the corner so that they could go on Clinton, either north or south. The protesters chose south. And then from there, the police were kind of in like a race to get in front of them, to just kind of force them to zigzag, force to isolate them. And that is effectively what happened for the next block over. So they moved south on Clinton, then they moved east on Monroe. Again, I'm assuming you're looking at a map. Even if you don't worry about it. East on Monroe, got boxed in again. Bicycle police showed up with their sirens and their lights. Night has also fallen. This is about 8 o'clock. So it's, and the street lights were off. A number of street lights were off, which I noticed. And I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but I swear to God, the street lights where the protesters weren't were still on. But again, conspiratorial, I can't confirm that there was any concerted, planning of the streetlights. There was construction, so maybe, I don't know. But anyway, once the group reached at the corner of Canal Street and Adams Street, which is the corner of Chicago Union Station, which is a major juncture. It's like Grand Central Station in New York. It's the major train station in the city. The protesters tried to get onto Adams, moving west on Adams Street at a specific corner, and the police boxed them in so that the protesters could move only on the sidewalk on Adams. They made a couple more arrests in the meantime. Protesters are attempting to push through the bike line. Police are kettling them free on the sidewalk. Police are pretty confident here. They've got unhelmeted police commanders in white shirts walking right alongside the front of the protest. Police bikes quickly filling up the last and moving up to the front.
And then finally, the protesters reached what would be their farthest western approach, which was about, 150 feet from their original position, which is about as close as they got to the United Center, 150 feet. But they're on the corner now of Adams and Clinton, and they're in front of this Circle K. And there's a part of me that really wanted to joke, oh my God, this is the Battle of Circle K. But no.
Strange things are afoot at Circle K.
Yes. No. The police again boxed them in so that they were only on the sidewalk now at the corner of Clinton and Adams in front of this convenience store. And the police said, okay, we're putting it here. We're marking it so that we're going to reinforce the lines. A whole battalion or platoon, I don't know, a whole platoon of 30 more police riot cops came in and reinforced this bulge. So it was like this big bulge that the BEL protesters were trying to push out of to get out of to move westward, and the police were just not having it. And then they made about 7 to 10 more arrests, including a photographer wearing press credentials.
Arrest made. 2043. Lot of press still here. A lot of police having to keep them quarantined as well. Green hats, legal observers still here watching on. Those were definitely some of the chant leaders with megaphones seen earlier. Member of the press being arrested. 2045.
So on the corner of Clinton and Adams, I was on this intersection and this other photographer was at this intersection in the middle of it, taking pictures of the arrest, taking pictures of all the ruckus. The big gaggle of media was on the other side of the street, and I was kind of isolated behind the police line. But so I'm watching this from behind the line. The deputy director or assistant director of news affairs for CPD. So he's the guy that talks to the press for the Chicago police. He's not wearing any protective equipment. He's just kind of in this police jacket, this like zip up, this windbreaker and a shirt. And he's kind of telling press to move back or, this and that. And he's kind of bossing people around, bossing police officers around even, which is kind of weird because he's the news affairs guy, but whatever. He tells me and this other photographer to move back onto the sidewalk. I move back, and this other photographer who's, 6 feet ahead of me, apparently it took too long for them to move back. And it's like, you know what? Just arrest them, book them. And then they snatch her. And she's wearing a clear orange press badge. And at that point, the green hats are really calling out for their name and calling out that this is a press arrest. And later that night, I think Jinx Press, which is a local independent street reporting group that does a lot of this stuff, way more experienced than I am in this stuff. They reported 4 members of the press, which is one more than the police were admitting to.
Love to see it.
Yeah, that was probably for me the scariest part of the night personally, even more so than the scuffle, which got really close to me, just because it's like, oh, I'm by myself. Because again, I'm behind the police line with like a dozen other people at most, and the main gaggle of press is 50 feet on the other side of the police line looking at the protesters. So if I get snatched, no one's going to see this except maybe the green hats, which arguably is the most important. But yeah, so for the next 15 minutes, arrests made, green hats shouting for their names. There's a paddy wagon that pulls up. Really interesting tactic. A small group of protesters in all black. I'm talking black shirt, black pants, black ski masks. They got together in a group, made sure they wouldn't get arrested themselves, and then as close as they could get to the paddy wagon, as where people were being processed, where arrestees were being processed, they started chanting and shouting the National Lawyers Guild hotline repeatedly for a good minute or so. So that way the arrestees could remember it and that they could call it so that they can get proper legal representation, which I thought was a very smart tactic.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the Battle of Circle K did not wind up being very fruitful. I
mean, most trips to Circle K are not very fruitful. So, they're staying on brand, even in war.
There's a good one near my place. But honestly, once the BEL group left 500 West Madison, that specific spot, it didn't look like they were trying to march towards the DNC anymore. At that point, it looks like they were just trying to leave to like, I don't know, to get away from the police in general. Yeah, so if you've been following along on the map, literally what happened was that the group was able to take a left, take another left, take a right, and then that's it. That's all they were able to do was snake around 2 city blocks because of the police being able to get ahead of them, being able to predict where they were based on their kettling, and then arrest. The National Lawyers Guild reported, I think, 72 arrests and 4 members of the press that were arrested in total. I personally witnessed, again, about maybe 20 of that at most. And it was also really funny. I will straight up say funny that there were spectators in the buildings themselves watching from the floor above on the second floor, just looking down, including one woman holding a bowl of food and just watching, like literally on the wall below her. Looks like we got some people eating there. Looks like we got some people eating some dinner, looking right above. Was police kettling, making some arrests, and protesters shouting, chanting, and then this woman just, it felt very 2020. You know what I'm talking about? Where it's like, yep, yeah. I'm just chilling inside, watching this unfold in front of me. Another one that happened earlier, actually, I should have mentioned this. A dozen people watching from the second floor of a Potbelly's sandwich shop, watching the big scuffle that happened at 7:30. Just again, watching this going on. I don't know if it was the Potbelly's itself, if there was a second floor, but it was above the Potbelly's, and it was really funny. And they were all silhouetted because it was night and the light was behind them, so it looked very ominous. But yeah, at that point, I'm by myself. A photographer just got arrested next to me, and so that rattled me a bit, not gonna lie. The protesters have moved back east, crossed the Chicago River, back into the loop where more arrests were happening, and I'm like, oh, I'm by myself. If a police officer wants to get me, no one will know for at least a day.
I would know, Dom. I would come looking for you.
At that point, I go the fuck home because I'm not planning on getting arrested.
But you will for the proles.
I will for the proles. But I don't think you would have known in time, so I didn't do it. Would you have given me legal representation, Andy?
Absolutely.
Like no. I'm not talking about the agreed upon legal representation in case of that we talked about in the weeks prior. I'm talking about like you personally. Will you appear in court and be my lawyer?
Absolutely. If I can represent when it comes to tax purposes. So if we can like somehow make this a tax case, I got you.
That's pretty good. Yeah. So in terms of what I took away from that night is that it really was doomed from the start. If their intention, which it stated that it was to shut down the DNC, make a big show of things, go from the Israeli consulate all the way down Madison Street, all the way to the DNC, get as close as you can and start some things there. If that was the case, they literally did not get closer than 150 feet from their original position. And I don't know what the lessons are. I had no idea of their internal workings and for the protest group, for BEL, for their organizing beforehand, but it just looked like either A, people got maybe too rattled beforehand, or B, they didn't do enough outreach.
I would say with part B on that one.
That sounds right.
The fact that I didn't hear too much about it, to me, means that there wasn't enough outreach done. But it's tough. I mean, it's hard to allocate resources to fighting something or protesting something that is already set in stone. And like, as we said, they'd already virtually voted. It wasn't even like there was a vote happening. So I think they took the contention out of it that you would have needed to make it a rallying moment.
100%. And I should mention that throughout everything I'm seeing on the street inside the DNC, because I each night I was able to catch a couple of clips from the DNC inside as well. It's pure celebration. Like people are playing Beyonce songs, people are partying. Lil Jon is doing Turn Down for What with the Georgia delegates. It is really not a care in the world inside the convention center itself, which is, as predicted, as we said in the last episode, a far cry from 1968, because inside it was just as chaotic as outside. People shoving each other. The mayor of Chicago, Daley, was just swearing up a storm, shouting at other delegates. We did not, unfortunately, get to see Mayor Brandon Johnson drop the F-bomb at Gavin Newsom. I thought that would have been really, really funny to see just from a purely like humor standpoint. But no, everything looked very clean and neat. And Honestly, because I think a lot of those things are specifically the Democrats when they have these big pageantry rallies and conventions. I think they hire people from like award shows, like Oscars, Grammys, and
Oh,
stuff.
probably. My takeaway from this whole thing is the DNC has either learned from its mistakes, which means that it is far, we always make the case that like the DNC is controlled opposition, and then like the liberal point is that, well, no, there's, old guard and, people trying to change the party from the inside and blah, blah, blah. But the fact that they so effectively changed to such a similar narrative speaks to the fact that they're very capable of being effective, as opposed to like, why are they so dysfunctional? Why can't they get anything right? No, they can when they want to. And this is like a really good example of that the capacity for the DNC to operate effectively is much better than most people give them credit for. And that should be not to say people shouldn't vote or I don't want to go into that, but I do think this is really insightful in understanding how the Democratic Party operates and what its end goals really are.
Game recognized game. The police, CPD specifically, they adjusted their tactics to such because, I mean, frankly, I don't think they really needed to, but I got the vibe that they wanted to make sure that they try to look as friendly for the cameras as much as you can wearing riot gear. So there was no tear gas that I saw. Some of the more advanced anti-protest tactics by the police I didn't really see in full force. The gas masks turned out to not be needed from the other press members because it really was just a case of bicycles, helmets, and kettling tactics. They were able to effectively, and there was also a lot of police media, specifically people with DSLR cameras and even phone cameras, video equipment, taking pictures of the protesters, probably to, identify later, or maybe their own sizzle reel of, hey, we did this. But they were on top of construction scaffolding. I don't think I saw anyone on the roof, but they were on top of construction scaffolding. There were drones, and I don't think the BEL protesters were operating those drones. 2 helicopters, keeping track of things, circling above at all times. And I'm not saying that to be like, make them sound hype or even to fear them all that much. It's just that they were prepared. They were ready for thousands of people to do what a group of 200 ultimately were only doing. And yeah, like I said before, doomed from the start, at least from this specific protest group's stated goals and actions.
Cool. Fun. Love that for us. So we're sending you to the inauguration, right?
Oh God. I don't know. I think that one's gonna be peaceful. I don't
Yeah, I'm sure
Kamala's gonna win and sexism will be solved.
That's what they told me.
Yeah, on Wednesday, August 21st, I actually skipped that whole day because after like 3 days of doing this, I'm like, oh, I'm dead tired. And there's the second part of the coalition stuff on Thursday. So I'm just going to take the day off. And on that night, there were sit-ins outside the DNC because they were asking for a Palestinian speaker. They didn't get it. And it was so funny watching all of these, Native American speakers, Asian American speakers, all these different, gay speakers, all this stuff, but not a single Palestinian on what has been the most hot button issue on the streets of the city that this convention is taking place in. Second coalition march on Thursday. They didn't even go into the park at Park 578. There were more right-wing provocators. The big surprise this whole week, which I hinted to earlier, Andy, while we were talking before this recording, Vivek Ramaswamy showed up at the communist table. He just kind of rolled up with a press gang behind him. And I was like, oh shit, it's that guy who tried to become president on the Republican side. Who tried to become the nominee and then immediately a curb stomp like all the rest of them from Trump. And he just talked to the communists for like 5 minutes and then walked away.
There's always somebody there trying to find a way to grift from it. And that just comes with the territory. And the problem is that sometimes they do get away with it. So fortunately, it doesn't seem like too many of those stories have leaked this time. So that's a good thing. But yeah. But no, seriously, Don, thank you so much for your work and your effort. And obviously doing the podcast, editing and all that fun stuff and having to listen to all of my voice for hours and hours and hours. But like this was a lot ask from you, and you've done a great job, and it's been really fun to see you like thrive in this role. I can't wait to have you do more journalist stuff.
Thank you. Yes, again, not a journalist. I have no journalism training.
Journalist stuff.
Thank you. Journalist stuff.
Yeah, no, this has been really exciting to see, not the Democratic Party do what it does, but to see how you could provide something that otherwise we couldn't do. And I think, we are a political show that doesn't really dive too much into politics. So getting that back into the mix a little bit is kind of fun.
You're an environmental show that doesn't talk about tomatoes and how to grow them.
Oh, fuck tomatoes, though. I mean, we can talk about Vivek, but we are not talking about fucking tomatoes. That's where I draw the line.
You're Italian, goddammit. These are your people.
Yeah, my people. We stole the tomato. And I don't want to admit
That's
it.
actually
If
true.
I have to go down that road, I can't decolonize myself from my tomatoes. All right? It's too much. A line must be drawn. Yeah, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. It was really fun. If you enjoy listening to Dom, send us a million messages so I can convince him to do more stuff like this, because it is fun. And yeah, we unfortunately did not have Matt with us today, but he will be back next week. Actually, no, he won't, because it's an interview.
Oh crap, did CPD get to him too?
Might have.
Oh shit.
He did text me.
Was he there? Oh, Matt, hit me up.
So yeah, final words, Dom. This is your baby. Send it off how you'd like.
Getting involved is good, and getting onto quote unquote the streets is good, but what's most important is to get involved with a community. So yes, you should, hot take, you should vote, generally speaking, at the very least for like local stuff. At the very least, you should, make signs and do protests and stuff like that. But when all the dust settles, right, all this pageantry, both inside and outside the convention center, when all of this subsides, things will return back to some kind of normalcy. And that is when the real work begins. We had talked about it earlier, where it's like, yeah, only 200 protesters showed up. Not quite the number I think they were hoping for. Why do these communist groups only show up in a couple dozen when they claim to have even more?
They are the voice of the people, all 24 of them.
Yeah, the mass movement of, a dozen people that could show up for what is supposed to be a generational event. Yeah, dude, build a community first and foremost. Like literally talking to your neighbor, learning how to cook for other people is what you can do to actually prepare yourself. And many things that, Andy has talked about on this show. So you know what? Having said that, shout out to my friend Nick, who fed me, who let me use his couch, his shower, and even his computer to edit stuff while I was busy out there all day and coming back dead tired, because he definitely helped me, support me throughout this excursion. And that, my friends, is building back better.
Jesus Christ. Anyways, yeah, so this is the last of our DNC fantastic adventure. Next week, we're going back to our normal interviews. I'm real excited about that, but I will miss you, Dom. It's so lonely on this side. So, yeah, we'll have to have you come back.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
The only time the real shit is gonna ever happen is when the people living within this system take up and they realize what power that we have, and we fucking actually enact this change that we need to enact in this fucking country. Other than that, no real shit is gonna come from the left or the fucking right, anywhere else. Revolution, baby.
You think that'll happen about 20 minutes?
Listen, I don't know when revolution is going to happen. But I don't know what's about to happen in 20 minutes. But, a revolution is inevitable. That's all I got to say.